Very, very long time. When I was 15 years old, my family came here from Iran in 1979. We really didn't have much religion to speak of when we were here. We were, nominally Muslim in Iran, but by the time we got to the United States, it was probably not the best idea to be Muslim. So we just kind of scrubbed any sign of religion from our lives. But I personally have been very deeply interested in religion and in spirituality ever since I can remember. And so it was very hard for me to grow up without any kind of religion. And when I was 15 years old, in high school, I went with my friends to this evangelical youth camp in Northern California, and I heard the gospel story for the very first time. This incredible story about God made flesh, and immediately converted and spent the next 4 or 5 years of my life basically traveling around the country, mostly working with young people, preaching this gospel message as I heard. When I went to college and began to study it from a more academic perspective, I suddenly noticed this chasm between the historical Jesus, as I was studying him, and the kind of Christ that I had been taught about in church. And while this eventually caused kind of a spiritual evolution in me, I no longer could be called a Christian in any sense of the term, and indeed, really kind of began to learn more about the faith and culture of my forefathers and began to adopt that anew. At the same time, I became fascinated by this person, by this actual human being who walked the earth 2,000 years ago in a land that the Romans called Palestine. And in a weird way, the more I learned about him, the more devoted a follower I became, far more so than I ever was of the Christ. And I think it has a lot to do with what this man did and how he sacrificed himself for this set of beliefs that he had that were predicated on the reversal of the social order of his time. Someone asked me, and I'll just say this one thing and then I'll just leave it there, but someone asked me earlier on, what does it mean that Jesus was crucified? And what can we know about that? Well, I often say, and in fact the book kind of begins like this, that if you really want to know who Jesus is, you start at the end of the story with the crucifixion. Because crucifixion was a punishment that Rome reserved exclusively for crimes against the state. Crimes such as sedition or insurrection, rebellion, and in a sense, treason. In a sense, if all you know about Jesus is that he was crucified, then you know enough to start questioning the kind of modern Christian conception of him as this sort of pacifist preacher with no interest in the cares of this world. And when you shatter that image, when you begin to shatter that image, and you start to place him in the world in which he lived, a wholly new Jesus arises. One